Let's try something cool today. So I'm wants to see if there is any kind of way we can say anything about transfer learning. So learning is a technique where you use or you train a model on certain data sets, and then you use the trained model on a new data set. You retrain on the new data set by showing few examples, and then you have to show less examples for the new training data set because the model has already seen um, a lot of features from the previous data set which it is transferring onto the new data set. Now here is an example of Arabidiopsis. That's a 3D data set of membrane, and it's membranes on a certain scale. And I have trained a model which is for not Arabidiopsis but for Escadian embryos of Elucia. And if I just use this model and without any retraining on the original data set, the transfer learning, or I should be able to see some segmentation of this data set, because both of them have because the previous data set was also a membrane labeled data set. This data set is also a membrane labeled data set, although on a different scale, but it is to show you that transfer learning is a bit scale invariant as compared to your deep learning model which has been trained on a particular scale. You can actually transfer learn from a model which has been trained on a different scale than the scale on this particular data set. So here is already the result, which doesn't look too bad with their obvious mistakes that now you have these kind of patches where it hasn't been able to do a good job. But if you look at these membranes that it finds, you will see that this is actually a good starting point for a retraining of the model on this data set. And the scale of these membranes that I'm segmenting now is much different than the scale of the membranes for the dataset that I just used the model of. So the dataset that we actually use the model of is this one. It will be on a different scale, so I would actually have to delete this layer so I can actually see the new dataset. Here. So you see that the membranes here are much bigger than the membranes that we just segmented, but I use the trained model for this dataset on that dataset that I just segmented. So transfer learning works scale invariantly, and this gives you a kind of way of creating training data when you don't want to start from scratch. You just start from here, you correct the mistakes that the network was making, and then you have a ground truth for your new data set that you can use for retraining on that particular data set. So that just shows you the transfer learning. Yeah, so I thought it would be just pretty cool to just show you this example.